when we channel different energies, and if in the case that maybe we are not practiced enough, or maybe we are delivering messages to larger groups of people, and if we haven't necessarily have our spiritual hygiene and our energetic hygiene well in check, and sometimes even if we do, we may actually pick up on different types of thought forms and egregores that are not really spreading the message of pure divine love. The reason why this is important is because not only is there a bit of a problem with like ego-based channeling, but also whenever there is a certain wavelength of frequency that a person still has in their consciousness that is actually based on the shadow, or maybe it is based on the egoic construct, egoic belief structures, and different sort of limiting beliefs, if that makes sense, and just individual beliefs. Not necessarily talking about like religion, even though in different religions and different spiritual viewpoints, there are still these beliefs that are very much based on that lower egoic frequency. And so what we are talking about today has more to do with collective egregores, collective thought forms, and yes, different thought forms and emotional forms and astral astral frequencies that may actually impact different channelings and different channelers as well. And I'm not coming from a place of judgment. I am simply putting this out there so that we can understand why some of these channeled messages are not quite not hygienic spiritually. They're not pure in that way. And they are maybe coming from more of a place of sort of feeding the ego in some kind of a sense, whatever that purpose may be. But then there is this really nasty side of this where we have these very hateful thought forms and egregores that people then channel. They actually end up channeling these, usually to their audience. I have seen this a lot, where especially like homophobic and transphobic egregores are just spewed out to other people just like that. And sometimes this can also, come from simply from the lack of compassion, the lack of empathy towards these groups of people, because people simply want to see the same reality over and over again. They simply want everyone to be the same. And they cannot understand that there is this variety of spectrum of love in this on this planet, and even in this universe. And even when you think about it, there are so many different star beings that are very just pure love. Okay. And when you think about that as just your first aspect of diversity, you will understand that there will be even more on this planet, in human form and non-human form. And there's also, of course, there's other egregores. So say, for example, in a lot of countries where majority of people are white, there can be racist egregores, or egregores that are very hostile and unfriendly towards immigrants, for example. But in those situations, we have to really look within as to what maybe in our belief systems are catching onto these egregores that are feeding into these. And that's why doing, for example, the work of decolonizing your mind and unprogramming a queer phobia from our mental fields and our emotional fields and all levels of our multidimensional consciousness and our sort of energetic fields, that is very important work to do, because that way we are depugging, we are unplugging and deprogramming all of this hatred that has been programmed by the normative society. And what a normative society is, well, it is there to, show us a norm or a normal that then, some entities, some beings want to be seen everywhere. And even this, when we talk about these entities that want these to be a thing, that can also be another thought form. And therefore, we also have to remember to take our power back and not feed into this us versus reality, where we are in a constant sort of a war against something, because that can also create more of that frequency on this planet and in the energy fields of this planet. So we want to first of all be very mindful in the way that we are approaching this. And yes, there has to be some level of defense, of course, against these things and transmutation of lower frequencies. And when we have really deprogrammed and unplugged from these dense forms of energy, that is when we can really truly understand the love, the pure love aspect of the universe. And we can understand it on a much more heightened frequency. We can understand it on a much higher level than understanding it as a mental concept. So because our energetic understanding and our heart-based awareness is always going to be much different than the mental or a logical way of understanding this. The true knowing of the nature of frequency will be always understood through the heart-based awareness. Because this is, first of all, it's our portal to source frequency, our awareness of source anyway. First and foremost, it's the understanding of our soul, the higher heart frequency, and that's where we can find the higher self and the ascension calm as well. And the heart, it has its own Taurus field and everything. Complex topic for another time maybe. But thought forms, like I said, they are this sort of dense frequency. They are more dense usually. Of course, there's different levels of light-based thought as well as source intelligence, if that makes sense. There are certain levels of frequency intelligence that is on that sort of higher mental plane. It's on that higher mind frequency that is, and it can also happen in a sort of crystalline frequency that again is also much more sort of pure in its energetic consciousness, in its energetic quality, and in its light quotient, right? There's a whole lot more light quotient in a crystalline frequency as comparison to just your standard mental level frequency. And these thought forms, because we live in this human form, that is where the access really comes. And I'm not saying this to so that we would just ignore completely what our human consciousness, what our human condition is, but I'm just saying that is why we need to also sort of master and purify our human consciousness of all of these sort of plugins and these, there can even be chords, like maybe you or someone or maybe some people are attached by a cord to either a group or a person or an entity, even just an entity that maybe feeding off of that, maybe feeding off of these hateful egregores and thought forms, because that is the thing. They want to create this frequency that they can then live on, and that they do live off of is that hateful frequency. It's all these phobias. Often, yes, hateful, often fearful. Sometimes the basis of hate is fear. Maybe it is a fear of losing power, a fear of losing control, or just straight up hate because somebody, happens to have a different soul frequency than they do. Some souls are expressing and experiencing a different polarity where they will want to oppose anyone who isn't on the same soul level with them, that is on a different soul frequency. But we do want to keep our sort of mental and spiritual hygiene really clear so that we can provide divine frequencies, truly divine frequencies. Because here's the thing, yeah, divinity is not this exclusive sort of frequency. It's more to do with unconditional love. Okay, the divine love and unconditional love, they go hand in hand. They are like the best buddies. They are very similar in their nature because divine love is unconditional. It's something that is going to transmute anything in its way that is of a, let's say, lower heart paradigm or lower love paradigm, because the lower love paradigm is very conditional. It's very much conditioned by control. Telepathy is another topic of conversation that I want to take on because it definitely has to do with the mental fields. and definitely happens. It happens a lot more than we think, a lot of more often than we believe. And that can also be another reason why some channelers so often may pick up on other people's thoughts and different belief system, different thought forms. And I've seen this actually happen, like very much in action. There was a time when I was watching someone channel what they called pure source consciousness. And the moment they said a few words, I just cracked up because it was just hilarious that this person was saying that this is pure source consciousness and then coming up with the um, coming up with what they came up with after that. Let me explain. What this person said was on planet Earth, just two genders. I laughed so hard because there is just no way that infinite source consciousness would not be aware of intersex people and anything and everything in between two genders, right? So it's like it's so hilarious to me that that is something that would come up, in what somebody calls pure source consciousness. And this is where a thought form or a thought may have been implanted into the field there, or maybe they just had that thought themselves and just let it through this channeling that was supposed to be pure, but it wasn't. And even some people in the comments, this is what I'm happy about, that there are still people who actually have their like sovereignty, and they were calling this out. They were saying, look, there are intersex people on this planet. Like you cannot literally say there is only two genders. And I'm so glad that those people speak up. That made me a little bit more hopeful and happy about the consciousness of the spiritual community. And there are also, other people who have, been actually in their heart-based awareness and understanding much more about the fluid nature of gender. Like it's not such a black and white thing that some of these people, let's just call them who they really are, cult leaders, because that is what will happen when we have a group of people that will only think a certain way and that is only allowed to speak a certain way, and that is only allowed to think a certain way. Let's just put it that way. When they're only allowed to have just this one thought, and to nothing else really, because that sometimes happens. That sometimes is a bit of an issue. And as we can see, this does come from that mental perspective. It isn't coming from a heart-based perspective when people are only allowed to think a certain way or only allowed to only agree with what the person is saying, or the channeler or the guide or the teacher is saying. There are, other situations where I come across these types of messages that definitely aren't in the highest good of all. They definitely come from wanting to control others, didn't come from. It was really funny that, I just got this in action because like I saw, first of all, the person said that message. And then, this was a live channeling. So in the live chat, somebody said, this is literally what I've been thinking and saying. And I was just like, okay, it is possible. It is entirely possible that what happened there was that the channeler picked up on that person's thought, or maybe like a collective, because this is like we're talking about collective thought forms that are then creating this sort of belief or a belief system. So we have to really be clear in all sort of ways. We have to be really clear when we go into okay, we just have to, right? We have to be really aware of what is going on there. And we have to really be aware of our own frequency, where our own mind is, where our own soul is, where our own heart is, where our emotions are. We have to be aware of what is trying to, or or what may be attempting to pull our frequency, it makes sense that I'm now able to laugh at what some of these people are saying, because it just it doesn't bother me that much anymore. But it is still misinformation. It is still BS. And I have to call it out. I have to say something. And the best way for me to say something is by, first of all, being happy. Number two, living my life. Number three, reminding people that there are spiritual frequencies behind these things. There are spiritual things, spiritual energetics behind everything. Everything is energy. Okay, even your transphobia is energy. This is not a place where you can just, be an asshole. This is not a place where you can just, pretend that divine unity, that unity consciousness, that oneness, that pure source consciousness is this, homogenizing everyone. You cannot pretend that everyone will just be a copy paste of one another. And you cannot pretend that hate through your mouth is love. Absolutely no. Saying no, having boundaries, is divine self-love. The more self-love we can cultivate, the more this entire universe will become love. Authentic self-love is willing to also give love to others. Authentic self-love is willing to express and extend their empathy and compassion. So this is just what came through today. I hope this has enlightened you. Thank you for listening. If you have any more questions, leave them in the comments below, and I will talk to you soon. Remember to stay in the frequency of unconditional love as always. Goodbye.